Incoming transmission.
The Klingon word of the day is Toj.
These are the voyages of the starship Enterprise.
So, this is a huge victory for the good guys.
Scotty, beam me up.
Resistance is futile.
Live long and prosper.
Boldly go where no man has gone before.
Greetings and welcome to the Computer Resume podcast, the show covering the entire Star Trek franchise in chronological order for fans new and old. I'm your host, writer-comedian, Mr. Todd A. Davis. If you're feeling down and are full of self-doubt, he'll encourage you to play with Legos. It's Thomas! Yay! Thomas! How you doing, man?
Oh, I'm doing great.
Oh, man, it's so good to talk to you. We've talked a little bit online on Instagram once or twice, I think, doing live videos, and we'll catch each other's live videos and then try to jump in. But yeah, like let's just get right to it. What are you primarily known for on the internets?
So when it comes to Instagram, I'm probably more known as a Lego builder, part of the Lego Instagram community that's really just focused on just helping just builders, new, old, whatever stage of this Lego building you are in, just learning to love what you create and love yourself and be kind when you're just evaluating what you've been working on. So I'm all about just really just crushing self-doubt and really just helping creators, specifically Lego creators, be a lot more just comfortable with what they build and just to continue to grow as a creative person. That's really what I like to focus on. But I'm also known as the Star Trek Lego guy. I haven't built a lot of Star Trek creations, but people do know I love Star Trek because I often use that as a way to describe, or I quote things that I build. I tend to reflect on Star Trek quite a bit.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think I initially, when I was searching and setting up the social media for this show, I think one of the first people I found was Chris Ames, because he does mini Trek mocks, and I mean that's his thing.
Which I actually met him when I went to a Chicago Brick convention.
Oh, that's awesome! Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, well, I think in the future there may need to be a strictly Lego discussion on the Computer Resume podcast, and I'll have both of you guys on, and we'll just nerd out over Legos. That'll be great.
Love it.
So let me ask you, when I have somebody on who is a big enthusiast of a very particular fandom or art, I always like to ask the question, which came first, that art or Star Trek? So Thomas, what came first, Legos or Star Trek?
Most definitely Star Trek. I actually loved Star Trek when I was just growing up because I used to watch it with my dad, the original series, which tends to be a story that a lot of adults seem to have. You know, they watched it with their parents and then they grew up and they kind of walked away from it, had like their Star Trek Dark Ages a little bit, and then they got reintroduced just to it. And I actually got reintroduced to Star Trek when I was in just a master's program, and I was working security for the school that I was actually going to, and I got to spend many nights in the guard shack with Netflix on at the time when Star Trek was on Netflix, and I was just up all night just rewatching the old episodes and just getting involved in the TNG. Then I got into Voyager, and then of course DS9 and Enterprise, and then the recent series came out, and my mind is just blown at what they've been able to do with the storylines and the continuity just the references to all the shows. It's truly been just incredible. I was actually asked by someone on an Instagram live if I had to choose between Star Trek or Lego, only have one in my life, which would I choose? And hands down, I would choose Star Trek.
Oh, wow.
Like
Nice.
I would sell every single thing in my room if I was told you cannot own a Lego piece in your house. You have to choose. I would choose Star Trek because it truly was something that gave me hope in a period of my life when I really was losing a lot of that.
Wow.
Right now, I'm actually going through a pretty tough season, and I know that Star Trek is there. Not to spoil anything, but when I was going through this thing at work that was a little bit distressful, and I felt like my life was just falling apart. And I went home. I said, I want to watch Strange New Worlds. And I turned on the Strange New Worlds episode. And this isn't going to spoil anything. And it opens up to Pike just completely just depressed and distraught, not knowing what to do with his life. Beard is grown. And I'm just like, once again, Star Trek delivers on pulling me out of a dark place. So that's really just how important Star Trek is to me. It's saved my life, I believe, on numerous occasions.
It's so interesting to me how this science fiction franchise can speak to so many people on so many different levels. My wife right now is actually in the process of writing a book about the American healthcare system. And the idea is treating the American healthcare system as a patient, but she's treating it as a patient that is under the care of Starfleet Medical. So she's taking all of the best points of every Starfleet doctor that has come through and applying it to how can we fix or diagnose the American medical system. And you look at there's tons of books out there, words of wisdom from Kirk, from Spock, from Picard, from whoever. There's all of these things, the fashion, the technology, the ideal of I'm going to be able to rattle off high levels, a high difficulty mathematics off the top of my head, like they do on Star Trek, and people strive to do that, and some achieve it, and they're fans of Star Trek and they end up working for NASA and stuff like that. And it's all of these things are just so wonderful. But it's interesting that this string of fictional narratives reaches so far into so many different people's lives. And now that I would say with New Trek, we have certainly the most diverse version of Trek. It has certainly progressed. It was always diverse, but has certainly progressed from the 60s into the 80s and 90s. And now the current iteration is the most diverse in front of and behind the camera, all for the better. Like, we're getting more stories told from more different points of view. And that's just, it's opening up even wider. Like it's really stretching its arms out to try to hug us as a society. And I love it.
And that's great. I love that. One thing that I love about Star Trek is that I actually have an Instagram video by an account that I follow. His name is Tom Bottleson. Not sure if you know of him. I can go ahead and send you his account, but he did the short video on why Star Trek, and he went through a bunch of the other science fictions, out there. Brave New World, Soylent Green, Planet of the Apes. They all depict the future being like a dystopia. Blade Runner, right? Like everything is just gone to hell, basically, right? Like everything is just like dirt. There's like the world's a disaster because we never got a hold of a climate crisis. We've blown each other up or whatever it is. But he says what really sets Star Trek apart is that it says that we got it right. We were able to move beyond our prejudices. We were able to solve our energy crisis. We were able to deal with poverty and hunger. lack of shelter, all of those things, and then we went to the stars.
Yeah.
And to me, that just gives me chills every time I think about it. Because to me, Star Trek is so much more than a show that I enjoy, but I see it as a commentary on how humanity has hope and we can move forward. And anyone who listening to this who doesn't think the new series out there are worth watching, I can tell you right now, it is already taking current world events and helping us see them in a way that can give us hope and look at things in a better light. Anyone who's not watching them, I highly encourage you to, because the message of hope just reigns supreme in Star Trek. So,
yeah, you're absolutely right. Let's dial back a little bit.
Yeah,
you mentioned that you started watching Trek, and I mean, I imagine we're fairly similar in age. You look to be in about your 30s. Am I guessing correct? So for you to be introduced to TOS first is fairly unique. So do you consider Kirk your captain and you're a TOS kid as opposed to TNG?
So probably not. I'm often asked, who was your favorite captain, or who's your favorite character? And to be quite honest, I view the captains the same way I look back and I think of who was my favorite teacher. I don't really have a favorite captain, because just the role of the captain in every single series, with the exception of probably Lower Decks, is largely around the story of the captain and the issues of command and the burdens of command. And the fact that I feel that Star Trek did such a great job, which other science fictions don't do as well. Battlestar Galactica is an example where all of the officers, I feel, were pretty much the same. You know, some might argue with me on that, but by and large, it wasn't about how are the officers dealing with the burdens of command, but Star Trek does. And so I don't consider myself Kirk or Picard or Cisco or Janeway, but each one taught me different things about myself, and they read me in ways. But the captain that I tend to be drawn to, it's actually Archer.
Really?
I think that Archer shows the brilliance of the combination of Kirk and Picard, and even Janeway, and just a fashion of, he went through a lot of the same stuff that those three captains did. I mean, he was lost in the Expanse. Janeway was lost in the Delta Quadrant. You have him just having the real, just serious ethical dilemmas and conversations. The episode with the co-janitor comes to mind. I think you see a lot of Picard there.
Yeah.
And then there are the episodes, I can't think of a specific example, when T'Pol was, I can remember the episode, but T'Pol was talking to him about how, you don't interfere with alien cultures. And one day he says, well, you know what? One day I might have to worry about it, but this is an Earth vessel.
Yeah.
There you see a lot of Kirk. So I really feel that you see the volatile nature of Kirk, the intellect of Picard, and the resolve of Janeway in one captain. So that's how I kind of view Archer.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it. I've been struggling for a long time, and then we'll get into Enterprise a little more specifically. But I've always tried to identify the particular captains as certain archetypes, and I've always said that Kirk is the pirate.
Yes.
Picard is the soldier sailor. Cisco is the father.
Yep.
Janeway, I used to refer to Janeway as the survivor, but I think Janeway is the shepherd.
Yep. And
I've always struggled with Archer, and I've kind of come to the conclusion that he was the explorer. He had a lot, and he also had nothing. Yeah. So he was, Starfleet was basically in a storefront, and they're just like, all right, here's your chip, go have fun, kids.
It's pretty much what it was.
Let us know what breaks, like, we'll fix it later.
Well, yeah, I mean, the ship wasn't even done. Like, it didn't even have the phase cannon on it.
There was no such thing as red alert. Like, they had to come up with all this stuff. Read alert.
So good.
When it comes to this one specifically, like the idea of the green girl, which was actually first set up in the cage. We got our first glimpse of our first green girl in Susan Oliver in the cage. But here, this isn't the first time we've seen green women. They actually did appear in the 3-part series that Brent Spiner guest starred in. But here's our first look at not only, I'll say, a slice of Orion culture more closely, in more detail, and seeing what they are capable of and what they do on a more the layers get peeled back on the Orions in this particular episode. I feel like agree, disagree? Do you have your own thoughts on that?
So I actually think that this episode, which I feel about a lot of the episodes, for example, TNG gets a lot of bad rap for having the worst Ferengi episodes, but I also think they were just informative in terms of the species development. Star Trek is one of those shows where I feel that you don't just get just character development, but you also get species development. And that's why I love this episode so much in Enterprise, which really, I can see a lot of the controversy, but when it comes to Star Trek, it's never short on controversy in terms of what they try to tackle. And also, Enterprise as a whole was a series that I feel would have done a lot better if they started in like 2003. Because what they wrote was before, like a lot of what they get this criticism for is 9/11 and how they kind of positioned the storyline and didn't rewrite it. We're not going to go down that path. But anyways, when it comes to this episode with the Orion slave girls, I actually loved it because the Orions were always talked about. We heard about the women. We never really got a good glimpse of the Orions as a whole. But in this episode, they jam-packed it in a way that really helps you realize that the entire species was kind of doomed from the start in terms of the women, were so focused on controlling the men and having the power, but they also needed the men because of their size to carry out what they needed, because just being able to influence someone sexually wasn't enough. They really needed the combination of the two. So I feel in terms of species development, the episode did a phenomenal job at just giving us a really amazing snippet into what that culture was. That we didn't get in any other episode. I would actually argue it is probably the best episode in terms of just, the species development, in the sense of only like doing it all in one episode. Like, pretty straightforward in my opinion.
Yeah, I think so. And it's interesting to me, when you stop and, a lot of people tend to focus on the overall narrative, which is largely what we do here on the show. We are covering the entire franchise chronologically, but it's interesting to get into different aspects of this franchise because it is so vast, very, very expansive. And to look at especially the certain species and what that species is commenting on about us, and what are the issues that we're having to remember and relate to them and deal with those issues to establish communication, and then also realize, oh, that's something I need to work on too. The idea of anger, rage, and violence, I think Klingons, and looking at things logically, but without any passion. You think about Vulcans, and it's very easy for people in power to look at people, their constituents, or those of a lesser station as a number, a statistic, something that, it's on paper, it doesn't really matter. No, those are people. And then, the flip side to that is looking at somebody who's completely passionate and, disregarding all logic altogether. And there you get the Romulans. Yep. And I mean, it goes on and on and on. But yeah, this has been fascinating, to look at, because I don't think even since this episode, and this episode was in April of 2005, I think we haven't really gotten much further explanation into the Orion people until Tendi from Lower Decks. We actually go to Orion and we see her interacting with her family and the Orion people to a degree. And I think that's actually, since this episode is our next closest, deepest dive on the Orion people. But yeah, this has been fascinating. Well, before we dive too much further into this episode, let's get to this week's recap. Brought to you in part by our Patreon supporters, Rev J, Jerry Antimano, Cosmic Crit, and Kitty B.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
UPN Friday on an all-new Star Trek Enterprise.
I think she likes you.
The women of Orion have the power.
Feel the power. But an archer is a very large...
Do you feel me?
Ship.
The power to drive half the crew.
Their presence is becoming disruptive.
You're telling me.
It's a highly potent pheromone.
Do you feel me?
Out of control. With only 6 episodes left, anything could happen.
Enterprise is approached by an Orion Syndicate vessel, and Archer is invited to visit by its captain, Harad Sar. During the visit, Archer and Reed are entertained by 3 Orion dancers, Navar, Dinesh, and Maras. Archer negotiates with Harad Sar, and they agree to a joint magnesite mining operation. And at Harad Sar's insistence, the 3 slaves are gifted to him. Archer and Reed return to Enterprise with the Orion women and set a course to survey the nearby planet. En route, the presence of the Green Girls begins having an effect on the crew. Men become increasingly aggressive, while women increasingly suffer from headaches. Navar focuses her attentions on Archer, while Dinesh seduces Commander Kelby. Arriving at the planet, a sluggish Archer orders Reed to destroy another ship. But he refuses, and it escapes.
Meanwhile,
Kelby sabotages the warp drive before Trip can stop him. Afterwards, Doc Phlox determines that the Orions are producing pheromones, causing the crew's adrenaline levels to spike. Only T'Pucker remain unaffected, since she is Vulcan and he shares her immunity because of their psychic bond.
How convenient.
The Orions are placed under guard in the decon chamber. Harad Sar returns in his vessel, attacks the now disabled Enterprise, and then begins to tow it away. He reveals that, in fact, the Syndicate wants Archer's head, and in this matter, he is the slave, and the Orion women are his masters. The Orions escape and
Take him away
to the bridge, as do T'Pucker. Navar tells Archer to arrest T'Pol, but Trip stuns all the male crew members with his phaser, and T'Pucker disables the Orion ship with a pulse sent from Enterprise's deflector dish.
Whoa, that was close.
They send the Orions back to their ship, and T'Pol finally admits she would personally like Trip to return, and he replies that he has already requested a transfer back to Enterprise.
well, Lottie frickin' da!
Hey folks, just wanted to take a second to let you know we here at Computer Resume Podcast are currently raising money for a family in need. This is a family Kat and I know personally, and they really need as much help as we can all give. We'll be having a benefit comedy show if you're in the Greenville, South Carolina area at Radio Room on December 6th. But in the meantime, please click the link in our bio on Instagram or Twitter and hit that top link for more details. Thanks, everyone. Now, back to the show.
So right off the bat, we see that Archer kind of there was a period, especially in season 1, where Archer makes some really boneheaded decisions. Like, hey, let's just go down to this planet we've never been on without EV suits. I'll take my dog. Everything will be fine. But it seems like this one,
for some reason, they're wearing ball caps.
Yeah, just a ball cap. That's all we really need.
Keep the sun out of their eyes, right?
Of course. But this is probably, since that period of time, this is probably one of the dumber things Archer's done of late. His time in the Expanse and the Xindi War really kind of hardened him in terms of being careful about certain things and not throwing caution to the wind so much, and realizing that things can turn south quickly. He goes to this Orion vessel with not much prompting, with one dude beside him, and is just kind of like, okay, we'll come over for dinner. Sounds fine. Nothing can go wrong. Like, what were you what did you honestly think was going to happen, man? Like, especially if you look at what happened in that 3-parter with Brent Spiner, where they disrupted their slave trade, which that's a big deal to the Orion people. So did you think there really weren't going to be any consequences with that? I mean, what are your thoughts here at the outset of like how things go down initially?
So, I mean, I think that it was probably Archer's way of trying to have a win in terms of diplomacy. I mean, that's kind of how I actually now never thought to an extent about how much of a bonehead decision it was for them to just say, yeah, sure, let's have some dinner.
Yeah.
But when you just continue to be reminded of what previously happened, with the 3-parter with the augments. What was he thinking? Like, he knew that he literally, like, people are part of their economy, and they literally expended resources. Like, it would be like a barrel of oil, like spilling into like a river. Like, they took Enterprise and they wanted, that like everything was calculated.
Yep.
They expended resources. So not only did they disrupt the slave trade in terms of who they were going to sell the crew to, but they wasted all their resources to get the crew, basically. So of course they were going to be ticked off.
Yeah.
And so looking back, it's like, what was Archer just thinking? Like, not only that, but but like the Klingons won his head on like a platter too, right? So I mean, like, he's like SOL at this point. Sorry, that's not. Sorry, I hope it's all right to say. Like,
that's fine.
Like, he's out of luck, So like, I don't know what he was like thinking. But yeah, it was a pretty bonehead decision.
Yeah, Jeffrey Combs will swoop in and save the day, right? But yeah, it just strikes as odd, and and again, like, as if that wasn't a red flag enough. Hey, you disrupted our slave trade. As a gift, here's 3.
There are 3 slaves.
Yeah, here's just 3 slaves. Here you go. No problems at all. How
genius is it that, because when you're watching the episode sorry to cut you off, but the 3-part episode with the Brent Spiner and the augments, they're auctioning off one of these slave girls.
Yep.
So they get these men to spend all this money on these slave girls. So they get that into their pocket, almost as like a prerequisite for the rest that is to come. And then the women are sent to those men, who are then probably convinced to sell everything or give everything to the Orions.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
What, like, and like, again, the slavery's terrible, but what an ingenious way to exploit people. I mean, again, like they're reliant on one another, as I said at the start of this. Like, I just think that again,
yeah, that's perfect.
A really important part of the Orion culture for us to learn how the women are used to manipulate.
Not only the men, but influencing people of means and power.
Yeah.
To do Orion bidding.
Yeah.
You know, to
I mean, like you really can't, like it's
a
phenomenal. Like I think that the episode has its appropriate critiques, but I think we can look past them when we realize just it was written so well. I feel.
I think so. And this is the last sort of bonehead red flag thing that I'm going to point out.
Yeah, please.
You make everybody else go in the decon chamber when they first come on the ship. You're going to bring in 3 Orion slaves and not put them in the decon chamber immediately to make sure that they're square and good to go? Like, what if they have no nefarious, intentions? Yeah. What if they just happen to be carrying a disease that'll wipe out the entire crew? Like, what? Oh, man. And again, that I put on Phlox, which I won't blame Phlox for much, but that should have been like thing 1. He should have met them at the airlock, like, okay, everybody to the decon chamber, and let's go ahead and switch out clothes, and we're gonna take these and burn them, like. Oh man, I don't know, but let's let's not beat around the bush anymore. Let's get right to it. The Orion females are presented in a very sexy manner, very alluring, very scantily clad. This is nothing new for Star Trek. It's been going on since the 60s. That's kind of their thing. But again, it's also part of their culture. Like that's kind of how things work. I mean, we can see, certain things are presented from different cultures. The Klingon women tend to have that. Someone described it online as a boob window in their otherwise fully armored body. They've got a boob window.
Right.
Yeah. a boob window, which also happens to be right over their heart.
Well, remember, they have 2 of them.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that.
So
yeah.
Maybe there was some logic to that. I don't know. I mean, maybe the other one is like to the right or the left.
To the right, or maybe it's a little lower. Yeah, I don't know.
No.
But there's no, and I mean, we'll get into it a little bit later, but there's certainly no shortage of commentary about the misogyny that is presented here. Obviously, the women being in very provocative outfits, as we've mentioned, and basically just seen as eye candy for this episode. However, I think there certainly was an end game to that. It was not completely without reason.
Yeah.
And I think that we see throughout the series, there has been a certain treatment of women, starting with the pilot episode.
Oh, yeah.
Archer is very distrusting of Vulcans. And when he's presented with T'Pol to be his science officer and second in command, he all but tells her to go wait in the kitchen. Like, it's bad. It's racist and misogynist, like all wrapped up in one. It's like, whoo, buddy, this watches differently 20 years later. Like this is rough to watch. And I mean, we see T'Pol get put through the ringer, like at every turn, like, and kind of get the shaft in terms of some sort of resolution coming out of all of these hardships. Like she gets addicted to Trillium D and then, okay, she's cured, done with that storyline. What? Same thing with her, the episode commenting on date rape, where she's forced into a mind meld and contracts Pinar syndrome.
Yeah.
We see the initial act, we see the fallout of her catching Pinar syndrome, and then later it's just cured. Okay, no more problem there. Like, we get these buildups, and Jolene Blalock, God bless her, she swings for the fences when she gets the chance to. How do you feel about this being potentially another chapter in it's a male driven show? That's not a secret. And there's a lot of thoughts. There's a lot of negative thoughts about this episode in particular. How do you feel about it? Where do you stand?
Yeah, well, a lot of thoughts trying to compartmentalize them into things. So I'm just going to go ahead and start.
Take your time.
So I would say that first of all, I would want to kind of push back and say that not to push back on you, but push back on the critics that might think that this is just a revisiting of the misogyny of the 1960s.
Please feel free to push back on me. If I am wrong, please point it out.
Okay. And again, this isn't a right or wrong thing. This is just my thoughts.
Okay.
But I don't believe it's a revisiting of the misogyny of the 60s. Because I think that the audience of the 60s was a lot different than the audience of the early 2000s.
That's fair.
Because we don't really see a lot of we don't really see that in TNG or Voyager or DS9. I don't believe. I could be wrong. I'm open to push back on that if there are some examples of that. Of course, Deanna Troi and the cold and how her room always seemed to have the AC cranked up when she's wearing her nightgown. Like, I mean, that's like maybe one example, but I wouldn't say it's really this characterization of the 60s is being put into Enterprise, because you don't really see a lot of, the sexualizing of women in Enterprise that I remember until you get to the Orions. I mean, you do have the tight bodysuit onto Paul and 7 of 9 and Voyager. Sure. Know your audience, know what they're up to. Personally, I never cared for it. I felt it was reaching in ways that did not need to be reached. But anyway, so I'll say that first and foremost. I don't believe it's them trying to revisit the misogyny of the 60s. I believe it was a key component of understanding the Orion culture. Would the episode be shot and told in the same way today? Of course not. Because every single Star Trek episode is a product of its time. It's always been ahead of itself. So it's really easy to look at like a Star Trek episode just 10 years ago, right? Or there wasn't one 10 years ago. But
well, it's weird to think Discovery started in 2017.
Yeah.
That's been a few years now.
Yeah, it has. But for me, that's all still fresh, and that was on the cusp of a very rigid political climate too. And that influenced the storyline in major ways. But that's a different conversation.
Yeah.
So I would not believe that it's, and I keep saying this, is a revisiting of that. I don't believe it was the intent of the writers to create or to bring back like a misogynist kind of culture. My opinion, and I could be wrong, but I do think that the pushback is necessary, because I never want to tell anyone that they don't have the right to be upset or to feel that there is an issue with what was being presented. So I'm not going to say that, they're being too sensitive or see the bigger picture. I would not be a loyal Star Trek fan if I wasn't willing to listen to someone who feels that there is misogyny taking place. I don't feel that I would be a good person if I didn't take a chance to stop and listen. I personally feel it was purely species development. And I do think that now that you bring it up, I really want to go back and watch the interactions between Archer and T'Pol now. Because Archer was dealing with a lot of racism.
Yeah.
A lot of and there I don't believe the misogyny was intended. but I also think that because I always took it as he purely just hated Vulcans for one reason or another, which I feel that he had good reason to be upset with Vulcans, or not upset with Vulcans, where he had a reason to be upset with the Vulcans who held back his father's work.
Yeah, that was a large part of it. And I don't know that they ever fully addressed that he held his father's work over diplomacy. He was putting the past ahead of a path to the future.
Yeah.
And I don't know that was ever fully addressed. I don't know. Well, I do know that when the episode, I believe it's called Fusion, where they address date rape, and that's the episode where T'Pol is assaulted. No one ever says to Paul, I'm sorry that happened. There's
really good point.
No justice is doled out at all. Yeah. So I think there's how much of that was coming from the writer's room, how much of that was coming from executives, how much of that was coming from the network.
Wow.
Who knows? But it's there. And again, we're talking about this 20 years after the fact. Yeah. It's a little pointless to, point fingers, but that is what we do here on the show occasionally.
That's a really good point, Todd. Why I would be interested to know, how many women were at the writing table of that episode. I would be interested to know how many women weren't listened to at the writing of that episode, or how many women were consulted at the presentation of the Orion women.
Right.
Could there have been a point where Archer, made it an attempt to get them different clothes?
Yeah. I think they mentioned it, but we never see them even attempt to wear anything other than the chains and silk rags that they have. Yeah.
I feel like they were more concerned with addressing the slavery issue than they were with the women being treated as objects.
Yeah.
And I guess that is a valid critique, because even in, whenever this episode aired, 2003, is that when it was?
2005, I believe.
2005. Okay. Thank you. The feminist movement had a lot of traction. So I can't even say that there wasn't a lot of traction. This is really causing me to rethink my view of the episode.
Oh yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate this, because I'm actually starting to not like it.
Well, let me just say
episode.
So I'm actually, as you're leaning that way, I'm actually going to lean to where you just were. a lot of this, in exploring the culture of the Orion people was one of the goals of showrunner Manny Cotto. He wanted
they did a great job doing.
Yeah, he wanted to take season 4 and really strive to have it connect more to the franchise, because up until the end of season 3, there weren't a lot of connections there. We saw a couple glimpses of things here and there, but seldom, very, very, very seldom. Here in season 4, Manny Cotto was making big strides to connect things. See also the 3-parter. Again, I don't know how much we're going to mention it here in this episode, but the 3-parter with Brent Spiner, that was a huge, huge connection.
That Augment episode was beautiful.
Yeah, not only examining the Sung family, but also the Augments, which leads to Space Seed, which leads to Wrath of Khan. Like, that you can go down either of those paths, and those paths are long paths. So when we've got this here, it's easy to look at it and say, okay, yeah, you got a bunch of green girls half naked running around the ship. Okay, but if you remember in the cage, there was a reason that Pike had the vision of the green girl. The reason the Telosians put that in front of him. They knew that Starfleet had interacted with the Orion slave women and their legendary beauty and seductiveness, and all of these things were enticing to the male human creatures. So that's what was presented. Maybe that wasn't the intention in the 60s, but now that it's become canon, Manny Cotto relied on that and said, hey, let's make that connection. That's why that happens later, is that's a legendary thing in Starfleet history, is Jonathan Archer interacting with 3 Orion slave women.
Yeah.
And it becomes this thing that's spoken in hushed tones around Starfleet Academy of like, hey, did you hear about the Orions?
What a great connection.
Yeah. It's actually it's very smart. And yes, so, it looks one way, but it's actually something else.
I'm actually holding, both sides of what I've argued this evening, just in tension in my head right now. I will agree to say that I really love the development, because ultimately, as I said, the symbiotic relationship of the Orion men and women was essential to understand. And it even brings to a head, the Augment episode, like we keep mentioning that 3-parter, they were auctioning off the women, but the women were actually running the show, and they probably knew who was going to buy them, or maybe they already influenced them because they went by to look at the product before, right?
Of course.
So maybe they've already influenced who they want. That's really, really great. I think it's really good. But I do think that the critiques of what you mentioned, I do want to talk a little bit about to Paul and the fusion episode with the Vulcans, because that's a really important thing, because it almost seems like they wanted to address a lot of feminist topics in Enterprise, but they never really allowed themselves to go there.
Yeah.
And I really think that it was because the viewership wasn't ready.
Interesting.
Or they wouldn't have been receptive, because I'm not sure. I know that my girlfriend is like a Trekkie through and through. I mean, she is just a Trekkie, just through and through. I would be interested to know. I would love to see a graph, of what the fandom has looked like over time. Because I really think that I would suspect it is definitely more diverse than it was in the 90s.
Yeah, I think so. And I think as the show has progressed, the fandom has progressed. I think, I mean, it's, maybe perhaps initially it largely spoke to a primarily male audience. But I think there were things to be explored there, and by both sides, by all peoples, especially, and I've spoken about this many times on the show, the diversity of the original series. And then people are like, what? It was all white dudes. Well, hang on. Yeah, you had a white guy as the captain, but over his shoulder, you had an African-American female.
Well,
that was unheard of. Not to mention, in front of him was a Russian sitting next to a Japanese pilot.
Yes.
Like that was that was a huge deal all the way around. In fact, in the episode The Cage, they had quite a few women on the bridge.
Yeah.
There's the joke going around of Pike in that episode saying, I'm just not used to a woman on the bridge. And then, of course, Anson, an image of Anson Mount saying, "Oh, that was a long time ago."
yeah. Or forget about that.
Yeah. Oh, forget about that.
Oh my goodness! And what they're doing with those characters in Strange New Worlds.
It's wonderful.
Oh my gosh, it's so great.
And it was so interesting initially that the executives or the network came to Gene Roddenberry, was like, you can't have all these women on the bridge. Okay, fine. I'll replace them with a black woman, a Russian, and a Japanese pilot. Like, oh man, we should have just let him have it. I imagine that there was an executive like smoking, just chain smoking in his office, slapping his, secretary's butt, just going, oh, we should have let him have the women on the bridge. Now we got these.
Yeah, I know, and that's that's a phenomenal point. Is I've always loved Star Trek because even when it comes to this original series, you have episodes that just blow your mind.
Yeah.
Let That Be Your Last Battlefield is probably one of my favorite episodes of the TOS area. There's also the I'm going to totally butcher this one, but the cloud minders, the people who lived up in the clouds, and then the workers were below. Dealing with just classism. And it was also the episode where you learned that Spock apparently knew how to hit on women.
I forgot about that.
Never met a Vulcan before, nor I a work of art, madam. I was like, oh my goodness, fuck.
Ooh, he's a smoothie. He's definitely a smoothie.
And it was totally like polite. Like, it was like so polite. And
quite gentlemanly.
Kirk was just like, damn, son. So okay, but like, so Star Trek is a representative of its time, and then you have TNG with the Outcast when it's dealing with conversion therapy. You have the episode where Quark is really just struggling during the first season of DS9, when you already see him just struggling with the fact that he was gambling someone's life, where any other Ferengi would be like, I'm playing this game, I'm gonna win money, but so I just I Star Trek was always about 10 years ahead of its time. In terms of what it was trying to present, and what they're running into now with this Discovery is pronouns. How do you address certain crew members? Well, and the people and I see in comments like, that kind of stuff would already be resolved. Why are they bringing it up as an issue? I said, because it's an issue now. Like, Star Trek is a commentary on what's happening around us right now. And it's to help us look inward. So that's all I'll say. I don't want to. It's really easy for me to spoil stuff if I'm not careful. So
no, and that's okay. Here, looking at that and thinking about, we got a little bit shown to us of the trans community, I feel, through Jadzia Dax on Deep Space Nine. 100%. And I maybe a lot of people didn't really understand that at the time. And it was a lot of people just saw, oh, you mean she can kiss a girl and stuff like that? Oh, that's cool. Okay, it's deeper than that. But to go to what has happened in Discovery, where Adira Tal is talking with Paul Stamets and says, by the way, I go by they, them. And he says, okay. It's really, I think that was a message. I think that was a message in two parts. And, up until this point, I've always seen it of like, hey, yeah, you should just say, okay, and do your best. That's all we're asking for people to do, is when someone says, hey, I go by they, them, just say, okay. And then just try. That's all we're asking. But you know what? I think it's also a message to other folks to say, hey, you don't have to get bent out of shape at people. Maybe they don't know. Be kind like you would want them to be kind to you. So just say, just to let you know, and present it that way. There's no need to start the conversation at 11. Especially when it wasn't anywhere close there to begin with. Start here and just say, hey, just to let you know, I go by they, them. Okay.
And what's absolutely, I think, just amazing is how like quickly the whole crew, and I know like it's written that way, right? But
sure,
like I see it as in the future, it's going to be such a quick thing. Like it's going to be okay. Like this, how just quickly. But you also, I think what was really, really cool is it was a very obvious, just, hey, I gotta go by they, them. But they also had a moment with them where they began to say, I never really felt I was either. I never really felt I belonged. And I'm just like, there is an adult who is looking at this saying, that was me when I was their age. Or there is a teenager looking at that saying, oh my gosh, like I'm seeing myself identified in this episode.
Yeah.
And I just think that is absolutely just beautiful.
Yeah.
And
I think it transcends a lot of different things. I mean, we're talking about the transgender community in this particular aspect, but you know what? Feeling like an outsider goes beyond sexual preference or sexual orientation or gender identity, I should say. It goes beyond that. There's plenty of binary folks who just kind of feel out of place, you know, and I hate to tell you that going through life as you become an adult, that stuff doesn't go away. Like you might feel like an outsider, you might feel like a weirdo, you know, and there's such a wide spectrum of those things. And I think to kind of wrap up this particular section here, you know, you talked about where you know, Star Trek has always been ahead of its time and, you know, dealing with certain things and dealing with society and addressing issues within our society. Good science fiction, not just Star Trek, but good science fiction has always held up a mirror and said, hey, here's who we are. We're talking about it through, you know, people with antennas and three eyes and stuff like that. But this is who we are. And it may be a cautionary tale of like, hey, you know what? This drama that you're seeing unfold is based on actual events. This is happening in our world right now. So we can change it if we stop, think, and reach out to people or do whatever it is we need to do to quell this conflict, whatever it is. But this is our chance. This is our commentary on what is happening. If you feel a certain way about this, there is something you can do right now. You don't have to wait to the 23rd, 24th, 25th, 30 something century to see change. You can actually do it right now.
And to get back to Enterprise, because I know that's where we want to segue back. A retelling of Let That Be Your Last Battlefield from TOS was retold in Enterprise with the people who worship the sphere builders.
Yeah.
And they're talking about this war. They're having this war, this conflict, and they're fighting one another. And they want Enterprise to vaporize, you know, the enemy. And then Archer or someone, I can't remember who, looked at them and say, so like, what's the conflict? And then they literally say, we believe the spheres were built in X number of days, and they believe it was Y number of days.
Yeah.
And it's like,
it was something that small.
And for that, you're willing to destroy your civilization? Yeah. Like it's like no big deal. Like, oh yeah, like they're wrong. And I'm just like, oh my God.
Yeah.
This is like real life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. We've had some wonderful discussions on this show with folks who believe very strongly their religious convictions. We've had folks who don't hold to any religious convictions, but the discussions that have come out of them have been so wonderful. I'm so thankful. If I can take a second to just say to everyone who's come on or to anyone I've interacted with and had a deep discussion, even a surface level discussion about these issues through the lens of Star Trek, thank you, because I feel enriched for it. And I hope that some folks out there do as well. But you know what? No matter how you feel about Star Trek, good, bad, what you saw on camera, what was happening behind the camera, there's always one question you have to ask, good or bad, who do we blame? So this episode was directed by Alan Croker, whose last episode directing was season 4, episode 3, Home, which we discussed with actor filmmaker Matt Jennings back on episode 71. This episode was written by showrunner Manny Coto, as we've mentioned. His last episode was season 4, episode 15, Affliction. That episode also had our first guest star, Derek Magyar. who was returning as Commander Kelby. Both of those folks were involved in that episode, and we discussed that part of our Seth MacFarlane series with artist Dwayne Ballinger on episode 79. Now let's get to the Orion women. As Navarre, we have Miss Sia Batten, whose profile pic is from this episode on IMDb. Around the same time as the classically trained ballet dancers ensemble called the Pussycat Dolls was taking off in LA, she got her first credit on a TV movie in 1995 called Weird World, playing the role of Catherine Lane. Here's a synopsis. I thought it was pretty interesting. Greed, murder, sex, all appear to thrive at the Wilson Emery Institute for Research and Development, aka Weird, where brilliant, young, but emotionally unstable scientific geniuses are recruited to develop cutting-edge projects in such fields as virology, time travel, rejuvenation, and robotics. It sounds very much like a sci-fi movie of the week, but from reading a couple of reviews online, it actually sounded pretty good. So I may play a drinking game with my co-hosts on Cinema Shock, and we may end up watching this sooner or later. She would go on to do 2 episodes of the Red Shoe Diaries in 95 and 96, and then make her first franchise appearance on Deep Space Nine. Season 4, Episode 4, Indiscretion, which was directed by LeVar Burton, aka Geordie LaForge, and Season 4, Episode 13, Return to Grace. In both of those episodes, she played the character of Ziyal. And then we have Crystal Allen as Dinesh. Outside of roles like Beautiful Girl, Stripper, and Party Girl number 2, she's played a lot of women whose names end in A but sound like Selma, Lisa, Laura, Samantha, Priscilla, Linda, Teresa, Amanda. She did that one twice. Tia, Rhonda, Vanessa, Uma, spelled with 2 O's and not a U. Barbara, Jessica, Laura, Anna, and Cassandra. That last one, I will mention this for my friend Bunny Bishop, is actually a Buffy the Vampire Slayer knockoff.
Okay.
It's called The Slayer Chronicles Volume 1, and it was done last year. Interestingly, it stars Madison Russ, who's a young African-American female actress. But the interesting part is it was directed by her father, Tim Russ, aka Tuvok from Star Trek Voyager. Then we have Menina let's try that again. Then we have Menina Fortunato as Maris. I've sort of joked about the Orion Women's actresses' resumes here at the top, but honestly, these resumes are extensive, and I highly recommend folks go and check them out, especially Menina Fortunato. She's practically done everything you can do on a production. So just briefly, her first credit was on Alias, created by J.J. Abrams. Season 4, episode 13, which was called Tuesday. She was the stunt double for Sydney. Then she had Divas of Novella, which was a TV movie in 2008. She was an associate producer and casting director for that. Then Meets the Eye, 2012 short, where she was the writer, director, and executive producer. Murder 101 in 2014. She was the associate producer. She played the role of newscaster. She was involved with the choreography, the website design, and again, the casting director. Faith of the Eyes, a 2018 documentary. She was the associate producer, website designer, production manager, still photographer, and production designer. So yeah, she's pretty much, I was about to say a jack of all trades. She's a Jane of all trades, we'll say. And then rounding out the guest stars, we have Mr. William Lucking as Harad Sar. He was born June 17, 1941 in Vicksburg, Virginia, graduated from UCLA with degrees in both literature and theater, married his first wife, Mimi Hawkins, on June 19th, 1965. Then he got his first credit on Ironside, season 1, episode 16, Force of Arms in 1968. And then he followed that up with his first film role, Hell's Bells. Basically, in the 1960s, there were a lot of rebels on motorcycles and bad girls. This is one of those movies. Highly recommend you pull up the IMDb page because the trailer's right there, and it strikes me as like, I bet Quentin Tarantino has this thing memorized. Like, this is straight out of Quentin Tarantino's bag for sure. The poster for this movie reads, "Meet the debutante in a leather skirt. Too young, too tough, too itching for action to look for it. She'll make it where she is." I'm not sure I've ever heard a more vague description of a movie.
Yeah, I have no idea what is going on in that.
I have no idea what that means. Well, moving right along, Mr. Lucking would get some time on Kung Fu season 1, episode 13 in 1973. That was an interesting episode, being having a martial arts background. That's the episode where it's basically Kung Fu versus capoeira. So if there are any martial arts aficionados out there and know the differences between those two forms, highly recommend that episode of Kung Fu because you get a little bit of both in that one. And then he had a couple of comic book movie properties. And then he had a few comic book properties that he worked on, starting off with Doc Savage, the Man of Bronze in 1975. And then Captain America 2, Death Too Soon in 1979. That was a TV movie. And then 2 episodes of The Incredible Hulk, season 2, episode 2 in 1978. And then season 4, episode 4 in 1980. And then he appeared as the recruiter in Stripes in 1981, directed by Ivan Reitman, starring writer-director Harold Ramis, the legend John Candy, and of course, one of the owners of the Charleston River Dogs, Mr. Bill Murray. And then we had Kung Fu the movie. He would return to the Kung Fu franchise with the 1986 TV movie, alongside Oscar winner Martin Landau, son of the dragon Brandon Lee, Mako Wamatsu, and of course, reprising his role as Kane, Mr. David Carradine. Then he would get an episode of Silk Stockings, season 1, episode 14 in 1992. And he would return later that same year to make his directorial debut in season 2, episode 8, titled Scorpio Lover. He would play 5 different characters on Murder She Wrote from 1986 to 1993, and then make his first franchise appearance on Deep Space Nine, season 3, episode 24, Shakar, in 1995. And we will finish Mr. Lucking's career examination later in the run of this podcast. IGN said that although this wasn't the best episode, it was moving the series in the right direction and called it a decent hour of action adventure science fiction. Jason Davis of Cinescape said Kodo has crafted a script that evokes the ambience of the original while spinning a yarn that keeps even the most ensconced Trek aficionado in suspense, and I happen to agree. He concludes, this episode, not to mention this season, is what Enterprise should have been doing all along. That's high praise and a little bit of a slap as well.
Yeah, I actually don't think I agree with the last part of that.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, we'll get into it in our final thoughts section. But Jamal of Jammers Reviews said that it was too dumb, too obvious, too boring, and too rooted in gender stereotypes. He said that it was sexist and the worst episode of Enterprise in more than 2 years. Michelle Erica Green of Trek Nation, pretty much on the same side, said it was the single worst episode of any Star Trek series, including Spock's brain.
That is what I was laughing at, just for the record. You never heard me snicker there. I was laughing at Spock's brain because that episode is so weird.
Let's be honest, we all laughed at Spock's brain.
That's a ridiculous episode.
But Michelle Erica Green considered it a statement in misogyny, also thought it represented a scenario where homosexual characters do not exist.
You know what? And I didn't get to mention that. I actually feel that it ran into that. issue. So yeah, so I will definitely concur with that statement.
Yeah. James Hunt, last one from the critics here. James Hunt of Den of Geek listed Bound as the 4th best episode of Enterprise, saying that it found a way to include the Orion slave girls in a way that preserved the eye candy and shifted the power in the Orion relationships. So let's go back and take a look at some of these. I think you had an issue with
so yeah, it was the Cinescape one.
The Cinescape. Yeah.
So I actually I have a couple thoughts on 3 of them.
Yeah.
But the first one with Cinescape is, I feel when Jason Davis said that it is what Enterprise should have been doing all along, I actually would disagree, because I feel that season 4 was too anthological, because they went from heavy to storyline to accepting the critique a little bit too strongly of going back to the anthology of TOS and TNG. And I think we forget that what made Voyager and DS9 so successful was they were focused on character development within an anthology. And I think that's why Strange New World is doing so well, because they're focusing on character development. I feel that Enterprise in season 4 was more focused on the stories of individual episodes. They lost touch with their character development. So that's why I would disagree with that critique.
Interesting.
Not to say that he's wrong or I'm right, but just that I feel that
it's a difference of opinion.
Yeah. So personally, I think that season 3 of Enterprise is probably one of my favorite seasons in all of Star Trek.
Oh wow! Okay.
I really just felt it was a good story. It was fun. Single worst episode of any Trek series, including Spock's brain. I think that's just hysterical.
Yeah.
But where homosexual characters do not exist, I do feel that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Especially when stuff like that was touched on in TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager, I feel. Yeah.
But in terms of the James Hunt quote, I think that really starts with what I was saying at the start of the start of this episode of the podcast, was they found a way to include the Orion slave girls in a way that preserved the eye candy. Because again, I said they weren't trying to bring back the misogyny of the 60s.
Right.
But to show the dynamic in the relationship, and just kind of give you an idea of how this culture runs, and how that their culture through and through is not like a sexual culture. It is a culture of exploitation. Where before you get this idea, oh, well, it's just a highly sexual culture. No, I see it as a culture of exploitation. And I think that you need this episode to see that. So I can see why James Hunt would say it's the 4th best episode of ENT, because it does give you that species development. So
yeah, I think so. I think it's important to look at certain relationships and realize that you're seeing what is on the surface. There are relationships all over the world in many different cultures, and people have no idea what is going on behind closed doors. Not that it completely mirrors the Orion relationship, but just as an example of not knowing what goes on in other people's relationships, it actually makes me think of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. When the slap heard round the world happened, the news became inundated with every aspect of the Smiths' personal and private lives. And it was fascinating for me to go on YouTube and watch certain experts, especially body language experts and speech pattern experts, dissect what happened. And it seems like the conclusion that they were all coming to is there's more going on with the Smith family than anybody has any idea about. There's a power dynamic that we probably feel is one particular way, and it is becoming very apparent that that is not the case. I won't go into that too much more because I feel like that's still pretty dicey, a little sensitive area for a lot of folks. I know when that incident occurred as a comedian, I lost sleep that night. that was pretty rough. Yeah. But anyways, so we've started getting into some final thoughts here, but before we dive into our last little bit here, let me ask you the question that we ask every week. Is this essential viewing? If somebody is sitting down and watching Star Trek for the first time, is this one they can't miss for one reason or another?
I would honestly say it would depend on the viewer. There are some who just enjoy Star Trek for the fun aspect of it. Just the adventure, the just the science fiction, the lasers, the pew pew. I think it's one of the better episodes for that of Enterprise in terms of just being there's not a lot of thought. There's not a lot of cerebral approach to the episode unless you dissect it like we are. But if you're just watching it, it just seems like a fun episode where it's like, this is kind of interesting. So I would say for them, it probably is. If you're a casual viewer, you're probably not going to care. But if you love Star Trek through and through and love the species, the development, I think you'd be remiss if you didn't watch it.
Yeah,
I never give you a straight answer. I'm sorry.
No. That's great. The worst answer for me is yes or no, and no explanation. So getting any explanation is wonderful. For me, do I think it's essential to the overall narrative? No. But if you're a fan of The Cage, being the Star Trek history fan that I am, I think this particular episode brings out a couple of important details regarding Starfleet and the thoughts of human males of the Orion species. On the other end, I'm a big fan of Tendi from Lower Decks. And I think, like I mentioned at the top of the episode, we got to see a lot more of her culture through her. So if you're looking to sort of piece together the Orion experience, the Orion ride along, we'll call it, I think that would actually be an interesting 3-parter. Is Mariner going with Tendi to Orion, The Cage, and then back to this particular episode of Enterprise? This, largely this first, it's not exactly a first contact, but it's kind of, for all intents and purposes, it kind of is a first contact. So yeah, overall narrative, no. But if you're down for learning about particular Orion or a particular species culture, especially if you're a fan of the prosthetics and makeup, the legendary crews that have worked on Star Trek makeup and special effects, I think this kind of lumps into that as well. So, Thomas, thank you so much for joining us for this discussion of this episode of Enterprise. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap things up?
Well, one thing I would say is that I believe that Star Trek is so much more than just TV show. I believe I've already said once in either a pre-conversation or during this episode that it is just social commentary, and it gives us an opportunity to just have Star Trek read or just our current life situation. And I watch episodes of TNG or TOS, whatever it is, and I really see it as, me peering into the human condition.
Absolutely.
So just a couple of quotes. One, we mentioned the episode where T'Pol gets addicted to Trillium D.
Yes.
And she says, Captain, the logical thing is for you to drop me off on the nearest M-class world and plate the hole with Trillium D. And Picard says, I can't save humanity by destroying the very thing that makes me human. Yeah. I think he was regretting a lot of his choices. And then you see him make some choices where he was kind of forsaking his humanity later on. But that's what I love about this next quote that I'm going to share.
Yeah.
I actually had to look it up because I want to make sure I get it just right.
Mm-hmm.
It's when Saval and Archer are talking about, like, Archer basically asks Saval, like, what's your problem with humans? Why do you hold us back? And Saval says this. He says, we don't know what to do about humans. Of all the species we've made contact with, this is to Admiral Forrest. Of all the species we've made contact with, yours is the only one we can't define. You have the arrogance of Andorians, the stubborn pride of the Tellarites. One moment you're as driven by your emotions as Klingons, and the next you confound us by suddenly embracing logic. And I think that defines what Archer went through when he was in The Expanse, in season 3 of the Enterprise. So my final thoughts would be, if Enterprise is a series that you don't like or you don't feel does a good job with Star Trek, or you never watched it because you didn't like the uniforms, read that quote and then watch Star Trek Enterprise in that light.
Yeah.
Give it a chance. People ask me where's the best place to start with Star Trek also. Another on my third final thought. If you're listening to this or you are talking to someone about where they should start with Star Trek, instead of giving them an episode to watch, tell them to choose a random episode, whatever it is. Just choose a random episode, because anywhere you land in Star Trek is the best place for you to start, because it's going to read you in ways that I don't think you'll ever really expect.
Yeah.
So again,
yeah, you're absolutely right.
But yeah, those are some of my thoughts.
No, hey, that's wonderful. I'll give a little shout out here to the Red Shirts podcast over in the UK. And I asked them, because they're covering the franchise as well, but they're covering it randomly. I said, and I was, curious as to why they were covering it randomly. And they said, because week to week, we are not burdened by what we saw last week. I was like, that's interesting. It's always a fresh approach. So yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's a wonderful way to approach it. Well, folks, next week will be the last regular episode of Star Trek Enterprise. But Todd, there's 5 more episodes of Enterprise that you haven't talked about yet. First of all, I know that. Second, don't forget that we're basing most of our timeline off the work of Mr. Jason Keener at the Star Trek Chronology Project. Next, did you not hear me when I said regular episode of Enterprise? Finally, don't call me Butt Todd. So we started this journey with him. It's only fitting that we come back to the close. It's only fitting that he come back to close out Enterprise. From the National Wrestling Alliance, the NWA, and Cinema Shock, we will be joined by Gary Horn for Enterprise Season 4, Episodes 20 and 21, Demons and Terra Prime, which are available exclusively on Paramount Plus. Thomas, what do you have going on that people can follow, consume, and support?
Yes. So right now, on my Instagram, I'm actually working on a few projects, a Lego project. One is actually going to be a 3-badge mosaic that I'm actually working on, made completely out of Lego, of TOS, the first communicator that we see in TNG, and then the redone communicator that we start to see in DS9 and Voyager.
Nice.
And I want to have those 3 communicators lined up as a mosaic. I'm also working on several projects right now. A large project for any of the Star Wars fans out there. I'm actually doing a medieval. I'm actually reworking my medieval Star Wars mashup of Cloud City. I'm actually reworking that for a convention in Chicago in June of next year. So that's what we're working on right now. And you can find me, you can bother me, you can send me messages at my Instagram, which is at Minimal Bricks.
And I am at Mr. Todd A. Davis on all of the socials. From all of us at the Computer Resume podcast, thank you so much for listening. And I'll see you in 10 Forward.
Support us on Patreon and like, rate, review, and share on all your favorite platforms. Feel free to send us your subspace transmissions to computerresumepodcast@gmail.com or at Computer Resume on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. The Computer Resume podcast was created and produced by Mr. Todd A. Davis. Our logo was designed by Will Martin and Justin Bishop. The opening theme was produced by Justin Bishop, and our outro music was provided with permission by Dronode. Additional music was provided by Mr. Todd A. Davis and Gary Horn, and the voice of Computer Resume podcast and executive producer, me, Kat Davis. Hashtag LLAP. We'll see you next time.
Going through a Star Trek. We're doing Star Trek stuff in space. We probably got some phasers and shuttle pods, and we're gonna find a brand new race.
How's that for a slice of fried gold?